I guess what I'd love you all to each do is just quickly, and maybe you can, again, this is, I'm putting it out as another challenge, but if you could describe the current state of the world in related to, from the seat you sit in terms of what, you know, the sort of the intersection of government and the arts. If you could look at the state of the world and pick a metaphor for it. I used the word scorched earth a little bit, and that was mine because of some of the things I'm seeing about the sort of decimation of the funding. But you might have another metaphor that might work better, because if you're sitting in a very different place than me, I have a bit of, I'm feeling very, you know, freaked out by all the massive cuts. And anybody can go, as whoever's thinking about it, but very in a pithy way from where you sit. What's the state of the world in arts and government? I do. I want to, because there are other people, there's lots of other questions that I want to make sure we cover.
Well, let me just jump in there, because I wrote this down. I see sea change, and I even, you know, looked it up and found the derivation, and it came from Shakespeare. And sea change is what government is looking at right now. We, the Arts Commission, are only just one part of the government that's facing tremendous changes in the economy and the population, the changing demographics, and the stresses that are caused by religious differences and so on in the world today. And we as the arts, we can't be away from that, we can't be separate from that, we have to be part of that. All government right now is facing this sea change in the population being younger and more diverse and more tied to technology, all of you more so than we are. So that's what we are looking at right now.
Sea change. Yeah. Yeah. And what did you, when you looked at the word derivation, where's that coming from? Again,
it actually was Shakespearean.
Yeah.
It was one of the plays, and now I can't remember which play it was.
Interesting.
But somebody's body was thrown into the sea, and then it floated down, and then it changed by all the creatures eating on the body. And that caused us.
Yeah. Anyone could go.
Well, Arts at Washington, Una, our executive director, wanted me today to specifically talk a lot about sort of what's happening at the school board level versus the kind of larger, because that's sort of a gap that we're filling in our organization. And I don't have a good metaphor for it, but she has talked about this shift in, you know, the schools kind of making a shift towards high stakes testing over the last several years, and that perhaps that we're ready to shift back to this idea of the whole child, developing the whole child, and what that might look like. And so it'll be interesting to see, especially with the budget cuts and the arts, you know, trying to hold on to the arts, not when everybody's taking cuts, but making sure arts don't get disproportionately cut in compared to the other core subjects, because arts is a core subject. Seeing how we're going to, if we're going to fare better if people are starting to take the whole child.
Isn't that already happening then?
Well,
I mean, isn't the arts taking disproportionate cuts?
yes, it is happening.
Yeah.
So I think another sort of, yeah, and so that's why the advocacy portion, which, you know, you might get into in a little bit, is so crucial to be at the table, and to not just be at the table when the cuts are, the decisions being made, but to have been at the table all along. So this sort of preemptive strike, if you will, having a presence at those school board meetings, things like that, all along, so that we're there, they see us.
It's the landscape.
I think
Looking from where
it's not exactly an analogy, but what comes to mind is, from my perspective, is that it, in some ways, it's the best of times, but it's also the worst of times. We're talking about the worst of times right now. But during times of sea change, there are opportunities to reinvent in a way that brings you to a place that's better than where you were. I'm not saying that this is going to happen over the next few years, but I would like to think that there's that possibility on a couple of fronts. One is that if you really take, with integrity, you look at the model that you have now, and you decide that it needs changing for whatever the reason is, economics, politics, whatever. If you have a lot of integrity in how you look at it, you can really make a better deal. Especially if you have constituencies on board. And although we're going to talk a little bit, I think, about how advocacy really needs to be improved, if not, you're going to see like a growth for advocacy. I would say that there are constituencies out there that weren't around a few years back, and that can influence the discussion, can help shape this new invention, whatever it might be. But whether we will do so, when we communicate with legislators or the business community, or whoever might be in that mix of making those changes is a question that I can't answer.
So Vincent, if you agree, maybe with some of Frank's assessment of best of times, worst of times, what are the little harbingers, or what are the little green shoots that might be, if we're looking at scorched earth, what's coming up that is an opportunity?
I was more on the dead branch side of the conversation. Because honestly, when I sit here and I'm thinking about, I've been in government arts administration for 20 years, and when I was brand new and I really had no context, I just started this work, we were having all the same conversations. We were talking about the nonprofit model. Now we're all broke enough that we're forced to actually maybe move to the next level, because we were talking about arts education and how do we tell our story, and we don't make the case, or we don't have the data that shows what we know, the input we have, what we know. And I'm awestruck. When moving here from Austin, I was on the board of Texans for the Arts, which is a statewide advocacy organization, and so I could be active on state advocacy issues, not in Austin, just like I live in Seattle, of course. And we were having the same conversation they were having when I first started in Texas in the 90s. It was the exact same conversation about where we were and what the challenges were, and we have great conversation, then we go back, and no matter how, so everything's withering. But in the arts community, very few groups, although we've seen a couple recently go away, they hardly ever really just up and disappear. They sort of just kind of wither a little, stretch some more, and figure out a way to continue doing what we do. And typically, we've never really been good about advocacy, whether it's telling our story, doing the data. It's just not what we do. We create. We don't take the time to really sit down and tell that story. That's just the ongoing sort of frustration I have in my job in general. Is that, we had incidents in Austin where something was going to impact the funding programs, and when that was announced to the public, 1,200 emails in a day and a half shut down the city council. But when I went to Austin 7 years prior, the arts community was all infighting with itself and dealing with their own issues, and so it takes a lot of community building to get to the point where someone like a symphony and opera ballet will stand up and fight for the individual artist funding and the little group's funding, even though they know that they would actually be better off. And it takes a lot of community building to get to that point. And,
I'd like to think that one example of some success in advocacy here locally is for culture with the bill done in Olympia. I don't know the stats. I haven't seen how many people through Advocate for Culture have been contacting legislators down there, but I do know the bill is in the Senate now, and it seems likely to pass.
And the bill, again,
sorry. Does anyone not know what for culture is?
Statewide for culture is not the bill.
Oh, well, the bill will either allow for culture to continue or it'll kill it, essentially. So there was a little bit of shenanigans going on during the regular session before we went into an extended session. And it was expected to pass. In fact, there was support, but there was some horse trading that needed to go on. And so the horse trading, from what I understand, has been successful. So now it's most likely going to pass.
Pass to keep it.
Yes, to keep it.
So